The prologue to the movie begins with a grand view of a huge house having a lawn that strangely bears the grave of a certain man named Musin Yilmaz. The scene cuts to one of its bedrooms, and we see a ghostly white, old man looking angrily at an old woman who sits tight on the bed and looks terrified. Suddenly the man moves, and behind him sits an evil creature looking at the terrified old woman with an obvious deadly glare. The movie begins, and we see a little girl named Hillel writing in her diary. She talks about moving into their grandmother's house 3 days ago. She knows that her parents lied to them, saying that they moved in just because the house is big. The real reason behind their move is apparently due to their father's business going through turmoil. She talks about her grandmother, who is sick and can't recognize them anymore. Just the other day, when she was sitting with her grandmother, the woman only gave her a blank stare. Hillel remembers the old times, when her grandmother was loving and caring, but now she can't even recognize them. Her grandfather passed away when she was little, and after his passing, her grandmother's health deteriorated. Their father didn't want them to visit their grandmother, because he didn't want them to get scared. The little girl talks about her brother Omar. Turns out the boy does not speak. Despite going to so many doctors, nobody could find a cure for his sudden muteness. He became silent after a terrible incident where they saw a bunch of guys violently beating us. It must have been so tragic. Hillel writes that although her brother cannot speak, they have personally created a special and magical bond between them so she can understand her brother. Just the other day, he told her that he's scared of the house, especially of the lawn where the grave of their grandfather sits. Who on earth's idea was that? The scene cuts downstairs where we see Faiza, Hillel's mother, and her sister Kubber talking among themselves. They are unpacking the boxes, and Faiza looks terribly worried about her husband's business going down. Her sister comforts her and tells her that when God closes one door, he opens 1,000 others. On the other side, we see Hallel going about his factory. He looks stressed and tense. After checking around for a while, he goes to one of his friends, named Sally, for help, but the poor man is turned down. At home, the family sits at the dinner table while they are served food. Rahim puts the food on the table. As she goes away, Omar starts playing with the food and does not wish to eat. Back upstairs, Rahim is showing the picture of the old woman's deceased husband to her. Night falls, and we see a strange white snake slithering across the grave on the lawn. Back in the room, the two children sit. Hillel keeps worrying about Omar, but he only gives her one word and coded answers. He keeps muttering strange things such as woman, night, grandpa, stairs. Hillel is confused. Who wouldn't be? She does not understand what her brother means. She comforts her brother and tells him not to get scared of anyone because they're all family members. Afterwards, she puts him to sleep and tells him that if he gets scared during the night, he can come beside her. On the other side, Hallel comes back after a long day at the office. He looks pissed and very angry. Rushing into his mom's room, he sees the caretaker taking out his mother's teeth and putting them in a jar full of water. The man ignores it and goes straight to the closet, looking for money, which he does not find. As the man goes out, Rahim menacingly comes near the old woman and says that his son is talking about the money she gave to Rahim. That was strange. Hallel comes back to his room and discusses his woes with his wife. He talks about how he helped Sally when he was in need, but now that he needs money, Sally has turned his back on him. Such is life. In the other room, Omar suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night. A strange spirit sits at the crown of his bed, whispering in his head to go towards his grandma's room. He walks in a trance. As he goes, we see Rahimi holding a strange non-human baby in her lap in the background. Suddenly her face changes, and she turns into an evil spirit. Omar goes towards the room, and as he opens the door, his entire body freezes with fear. What he sees is his grandmother in a wheelchair, being forced to look at the spirit of his grandfather, who looks miserable and in pain. Rahim stands behind the old woman, keeping her eyes on the old man as she resists and shakes in immense fear. Suddenly the woman sees Omar. She takes the old woman's wheelchair and runs to attack the little boy. Omar screams, and Hillel quickly wakes up. She sees her brother sitting upright on the bed. Hillel warmly comforts him and comes to sleep beside the little terrified boy. On the other side, Faiza and Hallel are sleeping soundly in their room. Hallel wakes up to a sudden call from Sally, who tells him that he is at the front door. When the man opens up the door, Sally hands him a bag full of money. He expresses his regret at not helping him earlier and tells Hallel that he can pay back whenever he wants. The man leaves as fast as he came. Hallel takes the bag inside and opens it to look at the bundles of cash. His entire body fires up with happiness. After a long time, he is relaxed. Suddenly, the man hears a strange noise coming from outside. When he opens the window, he sees Omar standing over his grandfather's grave, which has been dug open. The man calls out to his son, who looks back at him, and then jumps inside. Terrified, Hallel runs to save his son. He gets outside, near the grave, and hears his son screaming out to him for help. As he looks down at the grave, the last of his son's fingers disappear inside the sand. The man screams and jumps inside, clawing at the dirt to free his son. Out of nowhere, a menacing evil spirit appears at the top of the grave and jumps inside, attacking the man. The evil spirit bites his hand, and the man gasps awake from the deadly nightmare. He runs towards the washroom, violently rubbing at his skin. Beside him, he hears the noise of someone cutting hairs. When he looks back, he sees his mother in a strangely terrifying state, with blisters all over her body. She is sitting there in the bathtub, cutting her hair. Hallel calls out to her, but she does not listen. Terrified, the man starts chanting prayers. All of a sudden, the woman looks back and tells him in a heavy voice that there's no money at home, because she gave it all to that woman. The man gasps awake again. Turns out it was yet another nightmare. Hallel sits up in his bed, looking at his hand. It looks strangely bluish. But when he rubs over it, the skin slowly goes back to its normal color. Still shaking from all the bloody nightmares, the man slowly walks outside towards the table where he was counting all the money. There, on the table, there's no sign of money. Instead, there are just some onion skins scattered around. All his happiness comes crashing down. The man sits there all alone, hurt and crying. Back in the old woman's room, the strange maid stands over the poor woman's bed the entire night. The next morning, we see Omar trying to open an electric socket. He takes out strange pages from inside. Suddenly, Hillel wakes up and finds him getting a shock from the socket. She shouts and runs to save him, pushing him aside. Everyone piles inside the room, and they surround Omar. Suddenly, Rehaim arrives, asking what happened. Faiza assures her that it's nothing, and that they will take care of it. But suddenly, her eyes land on the strange folded papers that Omar took out from inside the electric socket. She asks what they are, and Rehaim tells her that she knows and she would tell her later. Later, Hillel sits, writing down in her diary about the happenings in the house. She talks about how Omar told her that every night grandma is being tortured with the ghost of their grandfather. But Hillel thinks that Omar is being delusional since he does not want to stay in this house. Hillel also thinks that it was a terrible idea moving there. She closes her diary and then goes to turn on some music. On the other side, inside the washroom, Faiza is taking a bath. Meanwhile, the creepy housekeeper Rehaim is using the synthetic teeth of the old woman to make a strange juice in the kitchen. Omar strangely sees this and shakes with disgust and fear. Back in the bath, suddenly Faiza sees a strange possessed ghost of her son over the bathtub, shouting at her that he will not eat the food that Rehaim cooked. The woman shrieks as she sees the terrifying happening. Omar throws the disgusting mixture of synthetic teeth and jaw into the bath. The woman shrieks and quickly moves aside. Meanwhile, back in the old woman's room, the creepy maid is making her eat the contaminated food. Later that day, Kubra arrives. Faiza tells her sister about the strange things related to the scriptures all around the house. It turns out, according to what Rehaim told her, her father-in-law would put up all these around the house. As the woman moves around, working in the kitchen, her sister gets worried and discreetly hides one of the pages in her purse. Afterwards, she comforts her sister, lends her some money, and then goes away. Hallel, on the other hand, takes his son out to buy a new toy. He stops at a discreet place first to get some money. As the man goes inside, we see another man named Orhan come out of his shop and catch the little boy's attention. He watches the boy and becomes strangely uneasy. After praying for the little boy's safety, he goes away. Hallel comes back with a bundle of money and drives off to buy Omar some toys. Back at home, Faiza and Kubra sit, talking about life in general. Meanwhile, Hillel comes and greets her aunt, who suggests going out for some fresh air. Faiza declines the offer, but Kubra decides to take Hillel with her, and they go out. On the other side, we see Orhan, who seems to be a very spiritual person, studying from an ancient book. He finds out that Omar indeed is special. Omar can see through illusions and the real truth of the evil creatures. Back home, while Faiza is sitting in the kitchen, she hears strange noises coming from upstairs. The woman gets up and calls out to the house help, but the woman will not respond. Following the noise, she enters her mother-in-law's room, where she finds the old woman vomiting. The old woman, who could not move an inch, is standing upright and vomiting a pool of disgusted liquid. Something isn't right. The terrified woman runs outside and keeps calling Rehaim to come and see, but the other woman is nowhere in sight. Faiza ends up searching for her in the basement and comes across a strangely locked boiler room. In a terrified and creeped out state, she tries to pry the door open, but suddenly feels as if something is behind her. Faiza jumps and accidentally steps on a nail, causing her foot to get injured. Crying out in pain, she goes and sits down on the side. While she is observing her injury, suddenly strange hairs start to creep out from inside it. The woman screams in fear. The hairs disappear as soon as she sees them, and strangely enough, the injury on her foot is gone too. Suddenly, Rehaim comes down, calling the woman. The woman tells her that she was with her mother-in-law all along, who is sleeping right now. Faiza, clueless and shocked, goes back upstairs. Later that day, while Omar is washing his hands, Rehaim comes to the washroom. She tries to talk to the boy, but he ignores her and quickly goes away. That night, while Hallel is taking a walk outside, his wife comes to tell him that they need to get away from this creepy house. The man gets agitated and tells her that he would try selling the house, but there is his father's grave in the lawn, and he's not sure that anybody would buy it. The woman then talks about the locked boiler room. Hallel gets curious and goes to his mother's room to ask the house help about why the boiler room is locked. Rehaim tells him that when his father was extremely sick, on the verge of demise, he would go there, so that's why his mother locked the room. She also advises him not to go in there, but the man refuses to listen to her advice and takes the keys to go open the locked boiler room. He is looking forward to finding his mother's savings there, but he does not know that his mother has already spent all the savings and has no money left. He goes down to check the boiler room, but unfortunately the keys to the room are not in the bundle. He comes back to his bedroom and sees his wife mechanically combing her hair. She then asks the man if her mother-in-law can stand up. Hallel looks at Faiza as if she has gone mad and tells her to just rest. Later that night, Hillel wakes up to find Omar gone. she hears a strange noise coming from the cupboard. Slowly and carefully, she walks towards the cupboard. As she opens it, a strange evil spirit lurks behind her. She sees her brother sitting inside and removes her brother's mask. Suddenly, the little boy's face changes into a menacing evil spirit. He roars and tries to attack the poor girl, who screams and moves back. Suddenly, Hillel wakes up. All the illusions fade away, and she sees her brother sitting all right on the bed. The next morning, Hillel writes in her diary about her horrible experience the other night. She feels terrible, but she cannot tell her mother about it because her mother is already worried about Omar and is taking medicine. On the other hand, Omar has been talking with a man named Orhan, about whom he told Hillel. We see Orhan in a mosque talking to a Haja. He asks the man if it's possible to talk telepathically with another person. The Haja affirms that it is possible to share spiritual energy and communicate with other souls. Back at his home, Hallel uses strange tools to pry open the boiler room in search of money. As he goes inside, he sees a lot of mannequins with scriptures all over them. Suddenly, the door bangs shut and the lights go out. Hallel gets startled and quickly pulls out his phone, turning on the torchlight. After searching for a while, he finds a strange box. When he opens it, there are banknotes and gold bars inside. The man quickly becomes ecstatic, but his ecstasy is short-lived as suddenly the box bangs shut and everything inside disappears. His phone's torchlight turns off, and he quickly snatches out his lighter to pour some light into the dark and creepy room. Suddenly, a strange evil spirit appears behind him and shouts at him not to sell the house. The man, terrified and creeped out, quickly runs out of the room. Upstairs in the kitchen, while Faiza is making dinner, she gets a call from her sister, who tells her to quickly burn all the pages that she found with the writings on them. Kubra tells her that they're used for dark sorcery, and they attract strange spirits. The woman becomes alarmed and agrees to do as her sister says. She picks out all the strange chits from inside the dustbin and lights them up. Suddenly, an egg lying still on the countertop falls down and breaks. Faiza quickly turns around to find strange hairs creeping out from under the carpet. The scared woman slowly approaches the hairs and removes the carpet to find them tangled in an object. As she picks it up, suddenly someone grabs her arm. The woman shrieks and moves back, but she is soon approached by a menacing spirit who tells her its name Sufazan. Hearing all the noise, Hallel quickly comes to the kitchen to his wife and comforts her. They then proceed to go upstairs and rest. That night, just like the nights following it, Omar and Orhan communicate through their strange spiritual bond. Orhan helps Omar to pray and create a protective veil, saving him from the attacks of the evil spirits. On the other side, Hallel wakes up and goes to his mother's room. He tells Rahim to go and get some rest, as he will be spending the night there. The woman leaves, and he quickly grabs his mother's neck, trying to take her life. Her mother's face contorts and turns into an evil spirit. Hallel quickly moves back, and then gasps awake from his terrible nightmare. He is lying on the sofa in her mother's room. The man quickly gets up, unaware of when and how he got there. He quickly goes out and back to his room, bewildered at what happened. Hillel, on the other hand, wakes up after hearing some noise. She hears her mother calling her downstairs. As she follows the noise, she hears her family members sitting around the table and laughing. The scared little girl slowly descends the stairs and comes to watch the horror unfolding at the dinner table. At the dinner table are bloody carcasses and raw meat, with candles laid out. The poor girl is scared of going out there, so she stays behind. Suddenly, her mother sees her and calls out to her, but she does not move. Her father then asks her grandfather to go and bring her to the table. The pale man gets up and walks towards the little girl. There are blisters on his feet. The terrifying man approaches her with a masked Omar tied on his heel. As her brother removes the mask on his head, the girl shrieks and gasps awake. She gets up to find Omar sitting up in his bed. Hillel then starts to cry. The next morning, Hillel writes about her terrible nightmares. At the breakfast table, their father quickly eats up his breakfast and goes out, after telling Faiza that he will try to sell the car so they can get a little financial relief. As he is going out, he sees Rahim going to his mother's room. Outside, he sees a woman looking just like Rahim around the corner. Getting curious, he quickly calls his wife to confirm that Rahim is indeed inside the house. Then the man follows the woman and ends up at a shabby house. After knocking on the door for quite some time, the woman finally opens up, and it turns out that she is indeed Rahim. The woman ushers him inside and then tells him about all the things that she did, along with his mother. Turns out she is a fortune teller, and she made amulets and charms for his mother, who was very interested in fortune telling and sorcery. When his father's health deteriorated and the doctors couldn't find a cure, his mother invited her to make spell-induced charms for him. Although they helped a bit, he started to act strange. The man used to go and sit for hours inside the boiler room, and he wouldn't talk to his wife. One night, the woman went into the boiler room and saw her husband with a strange woman. Her husband later confessed to the poor woman that he has another jinn wife and a child. Due to the immense amount of charms and amulets, the poor man was hunted by strange beings. Rahim tells Hillel that after knowing all this, his mother went mad and asked Rahim to help her one last time. Although she was terrified, Rahim decided to help the woman because all this happened due to their spells, and also because she was promised all the woman's money. Hallel listens as she tells him how the duo then decided to perform an exorcism to burn the jinn and make her leave the man. But they failed, and in the process Hallel's father lost his life. They terribly burned the and crippled the jinn. After this incident, every night Hallel's mother is haunted by the jinn, who makes her see her deceased husband and remember all the terrible memories to relive the pain. The terrified man finally understands that the woman who is taking care of his mother in his house is not the Rahim that he thinks. Instead, she is the jinn who was tortured by his mother and who is now exacting her revenge. After the man leaves, poor Rahim is beaten to oblivion by the jinn, and she loses her life. Hallel comes back home and tells his wife that they will leave the house and take his mother with them. That night, the jinn comes to warn the old woman that her son will never be able to take her away unless and until her rage is sated. Soon, Hallel comes to his mother's room, but unfortunately gets possessed by the spiteful jinn. Poor man. The man goes out of the room and, under the influence of the jinn, forces both of his children and his wife inside the boiler room. He ties them to chairs. Luckily, Oren feels that something is wrong with Omar through their spiritual connection and runs to save them. The poor family cry in pain and fear at what is about to come. The possessed Hallel looks at his family members emotionlessly. The poor possessed man does not know about the crime that he's about to commit. He picks up a hammer and makes a hole inside the gas pipe just near them in an attempt to take his family's life and give up. Slowly, the gas starts emanating from the pipe and filling the room. The helpless family counts their last moments. Meanwhile, upstairs, Oren tries to find the jinn so that he can undo the possession. He slowly follows the path towards the boiler room, but then suddenly turns on his heel and runs towards the old woman's room. He knows that the boiler room is a distraction, and the real place to find the jinn will be near the old woman. The man approaches the old woman and urges the jinn hiding within her to speak. He makes the woman sit in a chair, lights a candle, and then urges the jinn to speak up harshly. Finally, the evil being responds. She says that since she has suffered, they will too. The man grabs the old woman by her neck, threatening the jinn to come out, or else she will perish along with the frail body. The man desperately tries to reach the jinn, and finally creates a connection to confront the evil creature. The jinn, in a voice filled with anguish, shares her painful past, recounting the torment and burning she endured at the hands of these very people. Consumed by her own suffering and the loss of her child due to their actions, she seeks retribution, determined to inflict upon them the same pain she endured. With unwavering resolve, the man realizes that he must confront the malevolent spirit. He calls upon his faith and begins to recite a prayer, invoking the divine power that can break the jinn's hold. Each word is uttered with conviction, resonating with a strength that pushes back against the darkness. Empowered by his unwavering belief and connection to the sacred, the man reaches for a cherished object imbued with spiritual significance. This sacred relic is capable of banishing the jinn back to the realm from which she came. The jinn, weakened and unable to withstand the power of his faith in the sacred relic, is forced to retreat. Reluctantly, she relinquishes her hold, leaving the older woman's body. As the jinn perishes, the door to the boiler room downstairs opens, and finally the family is saved. The movie ends on a cheerful note. We see Hillel writing in her diary a few months later about the terrible incident. Her grandma passed away 2 months after the incident, and they transported their grandpa's grave and finally sold the terrible house. Their father's business also came back on track, and miraculously Omar finally started to speak again. Although what the family went through is terrible, all's well that ends well.